Have you ever met someone for the first time and instantly thought they seemed trustworthy? Then, a few weeks later, you realized you were completely wrong. Or maybe the opposite happened. Someone looked intimidating at first, but eventually became one of the kindest people you knew. If first impressions can be so inaccurate, why does our brain make them so quickly? The answer lies in human psychology. Your brain is constantly making predictions. Every second, it processes thousands of pieces of information from your surroundings. To save time and energy, it uses mental shortcuts, known as heuristics. One of the fastest shortcuts involves faces. Research suggests that your brain can form a first impression of a face in less than a second. Long before you've heard someone speak, your brain has already started judging whether they appear trustworthy, confident, friendly, or threatening. But how? One reason is evolution. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors often had only a few seconds to decide whether a stranger was a friend or a threat. Waiting too long could be dangerous. As a result, the human brain evolved to make rapid social judgments. Even today, that ancient system is still active. Without realizing it, your brain begins analyzing facial features almost instantly. For example, people with relaxed facial muscles, genuine smiles, and softer eye expressions are often perceived as more trustworthy. In contrast, faces with tense expressions, narrowed eyes, or tightly pressed lips are more likely to be judged as less trustworthy. Interestingly, these judgments happen even when a person isn't expressing any emotion. That's because your brain isn't just reading expressions. It's also interpreting facial structure. Scientists have found that features such as larger eyes, slightly raised eyebrows, and a more rounded face are often associated with trustworthiness. These features resemble those of infants. Psychologists call this the baby face effect. Since babies are naturally seen as harmless and dependent, adults with similar facial characteristics are often judged as kinder and more trustworthy. Of course, this doesn't mean they actually are. It simply shows how your brain uses appearance as a shortcut when very little information is available. But facial features are only one piece of the puzzle. Your brain also pays close attention to something else, something that changes from one second to the next. A person's facial expression. Your facial expression can change how trustworthy you appear, even before you say a single word. A genuine smile is one of the strongest examples. When people smile naturally, the muscles around their eyes contract along with the muscles around their mouth. Psychologists call this a Duchenne smile. Your brain is surprisingly good at recognizing the difference between a genuine smile and a forced one. Even if you can't explain why, you often sense when a smile feels authentic. Eye contact also plays an important role. Moderate eye contact is generally associated with confidence and honesty. Too little eye contact may be interpreted as nervousness or discomfort. On the other hand, staring continuously can feel intimidating rather than trustworthy. Your brain constantly looks for a balance. Another factor is familiarity. Psychologists call this the mere exposure effect. The more often you see a person's face, the more comfortable and trustworthy they tend to seem. This is one reason why television hosts, teachers, or public figures often appear trustworthy after repeated exposure, even if you've never met them personally. Your brain interprets familiarity as a sign of safety. However, familiarity doesn't guarantee honesty. It only changes how you perceive someone. Another powerful influence is similarity. People naturally trust individuals who resemble themselves. This could be a similar hairstyle, clothing style, accent, age, or even facial features. This is known as the similarity attraction effect. Your brain assumes that people who seem similar are more likely to share your values and intentions. Again, this is a mental shortcut. It isn't always accurate. Culture also shapes these first impressions. Different societies associate different facial expressions and social behaviors with trustworthiness. A facial expression that seems warm and friendly in one culture may appear unusual or even suspicious in another. This means that trust isn't determined only by biology. It's also influenced by the environment in which your brain develops. Perhaps the most surprising finding is that these judgments happen automatically. Even when people are told not to judge someone's face, their brains still generate an initial impression within moments. Fortunately, these first impressions aren't permanent. As soon as you begin interacting with someone, your brain starts collecting new information. Their voice, their behavior, their actions, their consistency. All of these gradually become far more important than their appearance. Which raises an important question. If first impressions can change so easily, how accurate are they in the first place? The truth is, your first impression is exactly that. A first impression, not a final judgment. Research has shown that people can form an opinion about a face in just a fraction of a second. But that initial judgment is based on limited information. It's a prediction, not a conclusion. As you spend more time with someone, your brain begins replacing those quick predictions with real evidence. Did they keep their promises? Did their actions match their words? Were they honest when it mattered? These experiences activate different brain regions involved in learning, memory, and social evaluation. Gradually, your brain updates its original impression. This is why someone who seemed trustworthy at first can eventually lose your trust. And someone who appeared distant or unfriendly can become someone you deeply respect. Psychologists refer to this process as impression updating. The brain isn't fixed. It constantly revises its judgments as new information becomes available. However, there's one problem. Our first impressions don't disappear easily. This is partly because of confirmation bias. Once your brain forms an initial belief, it naturally pays more attention to information that supports that belief, while overlooking information that contradicts it. For example, if you initially think someone is trustworthy, you may interpret their mistakes as accidents. But if you believe someone is untrustworthy, you may see those same mistakes as proof that you were right all along. The same behavior can be judged completely differently, depending on the first impression. This is why first impressions can be surprisingly difficult to change. Fortunately, they aren't impossible to overcome. Studies consistently show that repeated interactions, consistent behavior, and reliability are much stronger predictors of trust than facial appearance. In other words, your brain may make the introduction, but your experiences write the story. So, why do we find certain faces trustworthy at first glance? Because your brain is built for speed, not perfection. It uses facial features, expressions, familiarity, and similarity to make rapid predictions about the people around you. These shortcuts helped our ancestors make quick decisions in uncertain situations. But in today's world, they can sometimes lead us to completely wrong conclusions. The next time you meet someone new, remember this. Your brain has already formed an opinion before the conversation even begins. The important question is, will you let that first impression decide everything? Or will you give your brain enough evidence to change its mind? Because when it comes to trust, a face can start the story, but only actions reveal the truth.